Imagine this. You're on a barge moving at roughly 10 miles an hour, stacked with wheat from the high plains of Idaho, and oddly, although you're 465 miles from the Pacific Ocean, technically you're traveling on a navigable waterway. And despite the fact that you're traveling through a landlocked state with no coastline, the vessel beneath your feet is legally operating as an ocean-going commercial carrier. A situation that is the result of one of the most radical inland waterway projects ever completed in the American West. A chain of 8 dams and locks that turned two of the most punishing rivers on the continent into a 465-mile corridor to the open sea. The Port of Lewiston sits at the far end of that corridor, making it the most inland seaport in the entire West. And the story of how this all got there goes back to the origins of the United States itself. So how exactly did a state with no coastline end up with a functioning seaport? And what is it used for in the modern times? Stay tuned to find out as we uncover the history of the Port of Lewiston. I'm your host, Ryan Sokesh, and you're watching It's History. Back in October of 1805, Lewis and Clark paddled their dugout canoes down the Clearwater River and arrived at a broad, windswept junction in present-day Idaho, where they documented how the Clearwater emptied into the Snake River as the Snake bent west towards what they hoped was the Pacific. Clark noted in his journal that the Snake, which he called Lewis's River, ran approximately 250 yards wide at the junction, with swift, clear water and abundant salmon. A state of affairs already known to the natives who had lived along these rivers for thousands of years. And they knew that reaching the Pacific via this route was not for the faint of heart. You see, the lower Snake, in its natural state, was a continuous series of rapids and violent chutes carved through canyon walls. According to some sources, the river was among the most dangerous stretches of moving water on the continent. Even so, explorers saw potential in this area. In fact, the expedition returned in 1806, camped against the junction, and later pressed east towards Bitterroots. And in doing so, they created early documentation, their journals, which have since been widely read, that planted the idea that this particular interior junction was a place worth investing in. And then, within just decades, fur traders, missionaries, and settlers did exactly that. By the early 20th century, Lewiston was a regional agricultural hub, and the Snake River was, to put it plainly, a persistent frustration. Since farmers in the surrounding highlands had a serious geographic problem, they were hundreds of miles from the nearest port, and these farmers were entirely dependent on a railroad system that had achieved a regional monopoly and raised its rates to a level that cut deeply into their margins. Now, to push back on this, political activist Herbert G. West organized the Inland Empire Waterways Association as early as 1934 to promote what he called an open river, which would be a deep water shipping channel on the Snake and Columbia rivers that could finally compete with the railroads. West's vision was straightforward: build a series of dams and navigation locks along the lower Snake River. This way, engineers could create a chain of slack water pools, eliminating the rapids and raising the river's surface high enough to float commercial barges all the way to Columbia, and from there to Portland and the rest of the world. Though it should be noted that the only institution capable of building something like this back then, the Army Corps of Engineers, was initially skeptical. In fact, the Corps' original report opposed dam construction because at the time there was a lack of traffic. But the farmers' activist group noted that countless other dams were being built in the Northwest, and they argued that if you build the dams, development would come. Which, to be fair, was the same type of logic that justified federal investment in waterways since the days of the Erie Canal, and it was not an unreasonable request. So with that, a bill was introduced to Congress in 1941, authorizing the Army Corps to develop the lower Snake River. After several years of debate, Congress finally authorized the development in 1945, as a 3-decade construction program was completed. The first of 4 lower Snake River dams, Ice Harbor, was completed in 1962. At its dedication, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was accompanied by Idaho Senator Frank Church and Washington Representative Julia Butler Hanson. Though the important thing was that Johnson's presence was a statement of intent, signaling that Washington had committed to this project politically. With that, Ice Harbor Dam was completed in '62, followed by Lower Monumental and Little Goose dams in 69 and 70, respectively. Each dam created a reservoir behind it, converting another stretch of rushing river into a navigable pool. As each lock, among the tallest navigation locks in the world when built at over 100 feet, lifted barges from one pool to the next, stepping them through terrain that was thought to be impassable centuries prior. Though the construction was not without controversy. For example, Lower Monumental was particularly damaging, as an important Stone Age archaeological site was within its footprint. Accordingly, the Army Corps built a protective structure around the site, but it began to leak as the dam was filled, and the site was harmed all the same. And that wasn't the only issue. The environmentalists were also upset. By 1970, the National Marine Fisheries Service estimated that the supersaturated grasses from the dam spillways killed 70% of Snake River salmon. So, to rectify the harm, officials began trucking juvenile fish around the dams by barge as well as airplane, a solution that was supposed to be temporary and has apparently never ended. Anyhow, the fourth and final dam, Lower Granite, presented the greatest difficulties of all, though it was also the most important at this point, as its construction was the last step to create a river highway to the Pacific. Though by the time construction was ready to begin, the environmental movement had shifted public opinion dramatically. You see, the first Earth Day was observed in April of 1970, and so activists used that day to lobby aggressively against the project. Even so, the dam rose all the same. And upon completion, it spanned 3,200 feet, towering 100 feet above the river. The first barge to Portland was loaded with weed and departed Lewiston on August the 9th, 1975. At this point, Lower Granite Lake extended 39 miles upstream to the junction with Clearwater. And with that, Idaho, of all places, got its seaport. By 1977, 4 out of every 5 bushels of white wheat produced in southern Idaho were transported via these inland coastal river terminals. The agricultural case for the highway had proven itself almost immediately. Shipping by barge cost significantly less per ton mile than shipping by rail, and the savings translated directly into competitiveness for the farmers in the region. With that, the port's grain terminal became one of the most important wheat export facilities in the interior West. Today, about 1 million tons of wheat and barley are exported through the port annually. And the Columbia Snake River system is the largest pathway for wheat exports in the country. The port also manages oversized industrial cargo, like turbine components or refinery equipment, items too large to move economically any other way. And so that, my friend, is the story of why Idaho has a seaport. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider supporting the channel by joining our members area or hitting that subscribe button. Also, if you have an episode idea, you can send it to me via a new Google form that I linked in the video's description. Until next time, this is Ryan Sokash, signing off.